Hello everyone, my name's Phil Calvert and a very warm welcome to the Financial Advisor Mastermind and Challenge. Throughout this week, leading experts and consultants to the financial planning profession are sharing amazing insights into just what makes a world-class financial advice business. Today, I'm delighted to be speaking with someone who is a business development expert, specializing in sales and presenting with behavioral analysis methodologies. So I'm delighted to welcome from Scotland, Mr. Derek Borthwick. Derek, how are you today?
I'm fine, Phil. How are you? And thank you for inviting me.
I'm fantastic. Whereabouts in Scotland are you?
I'm in Edinburgh today, and we've got lovely sunny weather, which is not like it's been recently.
Not the last time I was in Edinburgh. Fantastic. So let's just crack straight on, shall we? Tell us a bit about your background, your backstory, and why and how it's led to us speaking today.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, my background is in financial services for, about 30 years now, Phil. I've had a number of different roles, working for life companies, some large ones, Zurich, Swiss firm, also commercial union. I then had a spell as an IFA for a while. Then I worked in the investment industry. The first company was with Fmri, Foreign Colonial. Then a couple of American giants, Fidelity and JP Morgan. And latterly, a Swiss private bank with an asset management arm called the Unpronounceable Zeitz, SYZ.
Okay.
It is run by a Swiss German. I left there at the tail end of last year and realized that in my time in financial services, that I spotted a number of things where I thought they could be done better, particularly on the communication side. So I spent a lot of time researching how the brain actually works and studied neuro-linguistic programming as well, just to look at some of the advanced communication skills and how these can be incorporated into adding value with clients. Because as the market has become more and more restricted in terms of you're no longer allowed to induce individual clients, the bribery act has come in, we have to make sure our communication is much better than it's been in the past to enable us to really get value across the clients and to make the most from the relationships we already have.
Okay. So, we worked together donkeys years ago for Zurich Life. I thought it was a great company, really enjoyed it. And one of the things you and I had to do, we were kind of tasked with seeing 20 IFAs a week, I think it was.
Was it not a day?
Yeah, and we had to do it properly too. We weren't allowed to just turn up like some of the boys from Standard Life or Scottish Widows would do and collect proposal forms. We had to do it as professionally as we could. And I guess communication skills and presentation skills was absolutely core. And I think you and I were very lucky in that we had some amazing training back in the day. I think it's the case that the vast majority of financial advisors, they acquire new clients through referrals.
Sure.
So sales presentations, pitching, these are all sort of areas that many advisors would kind of shy away from. But as you say, communication is critical. You mentioned neuro-linguistic programming there. Just bring us up to date on what exactly that is and why it's important, and maybe why financial advisors need to be thinking about learning this stuff.
Yeah, sure. I mean, neuro-linguistic programming became very popular in the 70s from the works of John Grinder and Richard Bandler. And basically, it can be thought of as a software for the brain. So a bit like if you were going to learn to drive a car, it'd be far better for you to actually have lessons to know how to operate the thing rather than just be pressing pedals and turning knobs and trying to work out things as you go along. And neuro-linguistic programming basically the thinking is that it models successful people. So if one individual person can do this, then the model could be replicated and taken by somebody else in a similar situation. So in simple terms, it's really software for the brain. It's understanding how we actually construct our own version of reality, because everybody has their own version of reality based on senses. And that's why you and I were talking just offline there about an image I showed you where you saw it one color and I saw it another color. And that's perfectly, we're both correct in that aspect. Our brain just processes the image in a different way. And for example, everybody has their own different version of reality. Women, for example, there's around about 20% of women can see an extra color that we can't see, which is a shade of blue-green, I believe.
Okay.
So we would look at that. If you're showing those two colors side by side to a female who has that ability, she would say, well, of course you can see that particular picture, those different colors. And you and I would be saying, no, there's one color. So it's a bit like somebody who's colorblind doesn't really know what they're missing because they've never actually experienced it.
So what are the implications then for this, for when a financial advisor is communicating with a client? Maybe they're presenting at a seminar, or maybe they're meeting a client for the first time in their office or their home. What are the implications for this with them?
Yeah, I mean, the main thing, the key thing you must do is meet that person at their version of reality, so their interpretation of reality, however strange that may seem. Now, you and I may be in a particular situation and we may look at somebody else and think that behavior is slightly odd. But to them, their behavior is perfectly normal. And this is why now, once you're aware of this, that everybody has their own version of reality, when you see two politicians arguing, I laugh now because they're both correct based on their version of reality. Now, the first gaining rapport, and we've seen many occasions, both of us, when meeting people and been in meetings where the rapport just has not been started. And that is the number one thing. So you must manage your state to make sure you're in the right state when you meet a client or you're presenting, and you must have the ability to understand their version of reality and move towards that. Not what you think is right, what they think is right, however bizarre that may seem.
So are there any particular techniques then that an advisor could employ or use to help smooth this communication to get to this point that you're talking about?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. One of the key things to listen to is the type of language that the client is using, and to try and reflect that back. Now, neuro-linguistic programming says that we all model the world, and we model it based on our primary senses. And those senses differ according to our sensory base. So some people are primarily visually based, some are kinesthetic, and some are more auditory. About 40% of the population are visually based. So that would mean things like, they would say, I see what you mean, Phil. It's becoming clear to me now. I can picture where we're going with this. Around 40% of the population are more kinesthetic. So they base their interpretations primarily on a sensation. So yeah, I really feel we're moving somewhere, Phil, or I can't quite get a handle on this. And then about 20% of the population are auditory, which means they have a bias more towards hearing. So they say, yes, I hear what you say, Phil. Or that really rings a bell for me. Now, it's not as simple as that. We all use the senses in a number of different ways, but there will be a primary base or favored base for most people. So to give you a rough idea about that, if somebody is a visual person, you can probably gather with me, I speak quite quickly. I tend to breathe quite shallowly in the upper part of my chest. And I don't tend to do much in terms of touching and feeling when I greet people. I shake hands and that's about it. If you were meeting someone who is more of a kinesthetic type of person, you find that their language reflects that, but also they tend to speak slower, and they tend to be a little bit more relaxed. They tend to breathe slower, and they tend to breathe deeper as well. And auditory people, they're less predominant in the population, harder to pick up, to be honest with you.
So when an advisor is perhaps meeting a client for the first time, what you're saying is the advisor needs to look out for these cues in terms of how people respond to them, and then they respond accordingly.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's like any skill that this takes a bit of practice. It's like when you first ride a bike or you first learn to drive a car. When you first drive a car, presumably it's not automatic, you'll find that the car will bounce around, and you're doing everything consciously. And we can only process about 7 plus or minus 2 bits of information in the conscious mind. We do a number of things unconsciously, often better. If I actually said to you, Phil, how do you walk? You probably would have struggled to explain that to me. And the more you think about it, the harder it becomes. So it's about developing your awareness. What we're talking about today, everything here is awareness, and incorporating that into the communication with clients. So being aware of even the client's body language will give you a clue as to the type of personality they are. Looking around their room, looking at how they dress, looking at how they walk. All these things give you a clue and enable better communication before we even get to the neuro-linguistic programming part. One of the main things you can do is reflect back to the person what they've just said.
Right.
It's something called the echo technique. Now, you may think, well, I can't do that, but I've seen people do this, reflect back the actual words And the person is unaware they're doing this, but it creates enormous rapport.
That's really interesting. So presumably relationships will be deeper at a deeper level, more robust, that sort of thing.
Yeah, absolutely, Phil. And one thing I sent out a post on LinkedIn, and I was refreshing myself with it today before we came on. And if you look at the FT readers, there was a survey done, and the key thing that they wanted from advisors, it was what was the things you most want from an advisor, was trust, transparency, and tailored advice.
Right.
What didn't they like? Well, they didn't like advisors who didn't listen, and they didn't like jargon. Now, how can you show somebody that you're really listening to them? If you reflect back to them what they've just said, you will instantly create rapport. The other thing is, if you're asking questions, my advice would be, they always said in our training days years ago, Phil, I had 6 good friends and they served me well. Who, when, why, what, where, and how. Now, I would say there's actually 5 good friends, and 1 friend you have to be very careful with. And that friend is the friend why.
Okay.
The simple reason, if I said to you today, Phil, why are you wearing that shirt? Well, what happens is I am questioning your value set, which is the very deepest part upon which all our decisions and behavior is based. And what happens in that scenario is, by me asking that question, you immediately go inside to go back to the time when you bought that shirt. And you think, why am I wearing it? Why did I buy it? And when you go back to that time, you have to internalize that experience. And in order for you to experience that, you get something called revivification. So you go back to the time when you bought that shirt. And now, when you're justifying it, you end up reselling that shirt again to yourself and to me. So it becomes much, much harder. So if you are going to use the word why, I would suggest using it with language softeners, which is, we try to avoid it, but if you have to, I would say, well, Phil, just so that I can understand you better, I hope you don't mind me asking, this is not too personal. I wonder if you just explain, why are you wearing that shirt today? It's a much softer approach when asking questions. But again, I would tend to use, particularly in business, avoid the why and use perhaps what and say, interesting shirt, Phil. I'm just wondering, what was the process you went through when you actually were considering buying that? It's a slightly different than Western values.
And how long does it typically take to learn these techniques?
Well, it's really part of an ongoing commitment, I would say. You can learn the basic things, such as using questioning techniques properly, such as we've just talked, and then using tag questions at the end. Can't we? Don't we? Isn't it? Doesn't it? Which again enables you to build rapport. The basic things are pretty easy to learn, but more advanced things do take practice, and it's part of an awareness set. So once you learn questioning, it's a bit like when you're public speaking at first, Phil. You and I were on a course years ago, and I've still got a video going back to those days when my body language was not so good, and there was uhs and ahs and going on. So when I was learning that, the first thing I had to concentrate was making sure I don't say then make sure body language is right. I've got my weight on 2 feet and not over in one side. And it's a bit like this with communication skills. To try and do everything at once is difficult. But if you start off and say, right, I'm going to work on this week, which is my questioning technique or my listening technique, and make sure that becomes subconscious and automatic, it then becomes much, much easier going forward. And then you can move on to the next skill set. Awareness of body language or something like that.
Yeah, and now you obviously coach this stuff. It's very much part of what you do. Are there any books that people could read that you recommend?
Oh God, there's loads and loads and loads of books. I think if you're interested in NLP, there's some good books by Richard Bandler. I haven't got the title handy with me, but I can supply that to you. I've got one version that's actually quite simply written. Anthony Robbins has done some readable books on NLP. If you want to go further and deeper into that, there's a number of specialist authors you can look at. If you're looking at things like body language, then Alan Pease has some interesting material you can look at. And Joe Navarone, who was an ex-FBI agent, he's written some interesting material on body language as well. There's a plethora of material out there, and I'm happy to suggest a couple for you if you want at the end.
Alan Pease is fascinating because I think he
Yeah.
was one of the most successful life insurance salesmen in Australia, and he's become an international body language expert. I love what he does. Just out of interest, I mean, you were very much in the corporate financial services world on the provider side of things, and I believe you were involved in platform due diligence and all that kind of
Yeah.
stuff. What was it that and obviously you do a lot of presenting, a lot of meetings, a lot of pitching. What was it that piqued your interest in this side of things?
Yeah, well, I've had an interest in this for about 25 years, Phil. And when I was researching this in the summer, I actually found a book that I started reading, and inside it, I found an old boarding pass from BA, which was from Edinburgh down to Southampton. So that would have been when we worked together at Zurich.
Yeah.
And I read that again. But what happened, the main thing for me was, Phil, that I've been in about 3,000 meetings. I've done about 500 presentations. I've done a number of pitches with fund managers. And what I noticed is that the way people communicate is the inverse to the way the brain actually works. And I'll show you what I mean by that. So what tends to happen is you go in and you have a pitch book or a document and you try and logic somebody into a decision. Now, if you ever tried to logic somebody out on a date, 10 reasons why you should go on a date with Phil Calvert, it doesn't necessarily work for you. It doesn't work at all. But yet we insist on doing this in business. So let me show you how the brain actually works. What happens is that the brain, what we see with our eyes at the moment as we look at each other is, it's not actually uptime reality. We're actually about half a second behind the main reality. But the brain makes a construct of its best guess based on all the senses coming in. And only 20% of the actual light coming into your eyes is responsible for the image. 80% comes from previous memories and your emotional part of the brain. And this is not all been improved now with something called Fmri, which is a scanning system you can use to see which parts of the brain are active. So what actually happens is the model you look at of the world is constantly being refined. So it's constantly being changed as things happen in that world and things change. And that's why a magician can fool you. If he throws a ball up 3 times, the first 2 times you actually see it, by the 3rd time, your brain is actually going, I don't need to process that. I know a ball goes up, it comes down, so I can put my attention somewhere else. I'll just make it up.
Right.
And that's how you're fooled. And you will swear you've seen it. You said, I saw it with my eyes. And then when you watch the replay back and tell someone either in slow motion or from a side angle, you will clearly see the ball being palmed. So it's easy to fool people on that basis. So think about when you walk to work in the morning. What tends to happen is the only people you will notice in the morning is a scenario where there's something unusual. So imagine I'm walking down the main street in Edinburgh and my attention could be inside. I could be talking to myself. I could be thinking about my holidays. I could be looking at the beautiful views around. And then I see somebody with a pirate outfit on. And my brain then goes, the model has changed. I need to process this. Now, I need to work out, what does that person with the pirate outfit represent? Should I first of all fight them? Should I eat them? Should I mate with them? Well, hopefully not. And does this represent a fear? Now, what I mean by a fear is the brain doesn't like things that are complicated, and it makes a decision very early on if it's too complicated to process. So then it goes up to the limbic part of the brain, which is the emotional part of the brain, and that's where we attach an emotion to that. So I may decide to laugh at the guy in the pirate outfit. I may decide to feel sorry for him. I may well be envious that I'm not a pirate myself. Either way, I get an emotion. And then what happens is I walk down the street and I have that moment where I rub my chin and I say, why is somebody wearing a pirate outfit in the middle of Edinburgh? That's kind of bizarre. And I try and work it out. So what do we do in business? We go in, we try and first of all, logic somebody into a decision. Then we hope they feel good. And then we hope they don't feel threatened, instead of doing it the other way around. And the way you do that is through stories primarily. And
okay, tell me more about that. That's interesting.
Yeah, stories. Now, if you look at this, no coincidence that when you look at a lot of religious teachings, and I'm not particularly religious person myself in terms of my knowledge of the area, but if you look at the Bible, for instance, it's a collection of stories. So we teach children by stories. Stories have a way to attract a meaning. Now, let me give you an example of this, and I can use a couple of things here. I'll drift back to NLP, and then I'll use the story as an example. So, first of all, I want you to think about a lemon, Phil. Okay, so a lemon is a fruit. It hangs on trees in hot countries, and sometimes it falls off and lands on the ground. And you can take the lemon home, and you can use it in cooking or for drinks.
Yeah.
Now I'll give you a second description. I want you to imagine a lemon, Phil, and I want you to put that in your hand and feel the waxy surface. Just give it a slight squeeze, okay? I can see you doing that now. And what I want you to do is take the lemon across the cutting board and pick out the sharpest knife you have in your kitchen and just slice through that lemon. And you may hear a psst as the lemon juice comes out, and then slice through the lemon. And then a slice will fall out. Then take another slice, okay? And you now will smell the lemon around the room. I want you now to take the lemon up, close to your nose, smell it. You can really smell a strong smell, and take a nice big bite out of that lemon. By now, 80% of you will be salivating.
Well, I'm picturing the gin and the tonic as well. I'm ahead of you.
And the reason for that is, in the first story, it was a description of facts. Yeah. Second description, the only way you can understand that story is for you to be the person doing the actions.
Okay, that's
so
interesting.
If you want to communicate something to a client or a group of people, stories are a fantastic way. And if you've ever tried this in a presentation, if you see people drifting off, one of my tips is all you have to do is incorporate a story. Just say something like, you know, as I was driving here today, and watch everybody's attention come back to you, because everybody loves a story. When you go to the pub on a Friday, you don't sit there and say, well, the tallest mountain in the world is this, it's so many feet, and you know, the chemical symbol for iron is this. You don't. You say, oh, what a week I had. You're not going to believe this. I saw this person. I saw that person. It's a collection of stories. So if that's how we operate, and the brain operates that way, why are we communicating with death by PowerPoint?
That's interesting. So in perhaps a seminar situation, using stories will be a great technique for financial advisors to draw people in. What about face-to-face? Just run me through how you could use stories in a face-to-face situation.
Yeah, stories, it's exactly the same principle, Phil. I mean, if you were looking to illustrate, there's something you can use. It's very popular in NLP. It's called My Friend John. And this is where you make reference to a story that is designed to convey a meaning. Because as we discussed earlier, the only way you can understand that lemon story is to be part of it. The only way you can understand My Friend John story is for you to be part of it. So if, for example, you were wanting to put across the benefits of life insurance, and I'm not advocating making false stories up here. What I'm saying is use stories that you have. Make sure they're legitimate. Everybody has got a collection of stories, and I would say write those down and learn those. If you were wanting to advocate selling life insurance, it's far better to actually use an example of a story where somebody had that life insurance and how much better their life was because of that, or somebody took out an investment or a pension, and you can show how much better their life is because of that, rather than sitting there and quoting a load of statistics to people. It doesn't work. If you want somebody to get involved, you have to get them to buy in emotionally, and you've got to have their full attention. I've been in loads of pitches. If you don't have people's attention, you might as well close your book and leave.
Yeah.
So you must get attention. Now, stories, this is all now starting to be proved scientifically as well, with more and more of this fMRI scans in the brain. They do a strange thing to people, and people are naturally drawn in and they naturally pay attention. So if somebody is losing a client, I would suggest, and I've used this all the time, I use analogies and stories just because I like them. I think it makes things more interesting. And we're in an industry of intangibles. You can't see what I do. As an advisor, you can't see what the advisor does. You can't touch it. You can't smell it. What you're doing is you're providing a promise for somebody. So
I think it's very exciting. I mean, as a profession, financial advice, financial planning has always been perceived to be about numbers, but in actual fact, it's about people at the end of the day, isn't it?
Absolutely, it's about people, yeah, and that is the most important thing. And I would say as well that before you meet somebody, it's something I've always focused on, particularly if you're presenting in front of a large audience or you have a pitch to do, is you must make sure that you get your state right before a meeting. And this may sound, people get blasé, and I've been in meetings before where some presenters have done very little preparation for the meeting. The meeting hasn't gone particularly well, and they came out afterwards and they said, well, I didn't really do very well there, did I? And you say, well, it could have gone better.
Yeah.
And they say, don't worry, I'll get better as I go along. Now, if you're dealing with somebody in a professional capacity, you have to be able to bring on that state at any time. Now, I have techniques through NLP that I use on myself and I've used with other people so that they can access the state. The other thing I would mention as well is that there's a lot of research being done now on physiology versus your actual state. So how are you feeling? And just by changing your posture and places you're looking, you can actually change your state.
I think this is...
You can always tell what... Yeah.
You hit on something really, really important here. I remember when I was a financial advisor, you'd done your prep for the meeting, but what you'd actually done is you'd prep the numbers, the charts, maybe you've got some quotes, something like that, but you didn't actually prep yourself. I know Tony Robbins is he calls it priming, I think. Every morning of every day, he gets himself into this state, for want of a better. And you think that's something financial advisors should do as well?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, everybody should do this before a meeting. It's something you should do, and it's quite easy to do. You can change states pretty quickly, and I'll give you an example of that. How you can, we'll give you a little bit how you can tell what somebody's actually thinking. A bit of mind reading, if you like. If you're walking down the street and you see somebody looking down to the left-hand side, if they're assuming they're right-handed, which most people are, they're in what you call auditory digital. They are talking to themselves. Now, if you ask them to make a picture, if you stop that person and said, just for example, what was the color of the front door of your first house? The way they would access that is they would have to look up left. So your eye movements actually are a way you access different states. Next time you're feeling down, alter your posture so that you look like you're really ready to lift about 200 kilos or something, and look up left, and you'll find it very difficult to be depressed or down. And if you're feeling tense before a meeting, if you alter your breathing, so you slow your breathing down and breathe from the stomach and take deep, deep breaths, your state will automatically change. It can't not change. Because NLP says that we model behaviors, and in order to access those behaviors, the physiology will reflect the behavior, and the behavior reflects the physiology. So physiology can lead you to the place you want to get. So I would say it's critical. It's not that difficult to do. Just to arrive a little bit early, take a bit of time, and get yourself in the right state. And there's more research coming out as well that actually shows, if you look at the heart actually radiates a field around it that is about 8 feet. Now, there's something, I've forgotten the name, the exact technical name here, but if you were to put two violins together and you were to pluck the string of one violin, the corresponding string on the other violin would start to resonate.
Yeah.
And that would suggest that there's somehow the sound waves are moving across and having impact. Now, I'm not for 1 minute suggesting this is necessarily embedded in science, but what I'm saying is if there is a small chance that you do radiate out and people are picking up on your subconscious signals or whatever, or your heartbeat or your respiratory system, whatever, I would suggest that it makes sense to make sure that is in the best possible state so that they're picking up your state, not the other way around. And you've spent a lot of time, people are always looking, they always want new clients, new clients, new clients. It's key we actually deliver to the clients we already have.
And presumably there's some advanced stuff as well for people. I'm just thinking while you're talking there, potentially the relationship that you have with a client could be set at that very first meeting, just in terms of how you come across, never mind what you talk about, but your physical presence and your state as you describe it.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. We shouldn't say judge a book by a cover, but unfortunately we do. It's the way the brain does it. And if you look at the research, if I was to show you a series of random pictures, Phil, and just flip through them and get you to have a look at them, and then I was to give you people that were in those pictures, say in 3-4 weeks' time, so you can't actually consciously remember any of the images corresponding to the people, you would be drawn towards the people of the picture you've already seen subconsciously. So there's an awful lot of subconscious behavior going on. So first impressions do matter enormously, and your body language that goes with that as well. So people will pick up on it. If you go down and I'm leaning forward like this and I have narrow body language and my voice is down, it doesn't inspire confidence. Whereas if you're sitting back and you're creating your space around you, using your hands and using positive body language, positive language, and listening to the client, reflecting back to them, this is going to create a great impression. So many people are blissfully unaware of this.
Yeah. Derek, I'm absolutely fascinated by this. We could talk all day about it. We're going to put some information about how people can get in contact with you if they want to learn more, or even work with you directly, which is superb. Now, one of the key parts of this program is a challenge that we're setting for our viewers and our listeners. And I know you've got a challenge for us. Let's hear what you've got for us.
I have. Well, as my area is personal development, and I read about a book a week, I think it's only fair I set your viewers a slightly lesser target. I want them to read at least one book a month. Now, the other thing is, I'm going to hear a lot of excuses there. People saying, I don't have the time for this. And I'm going to tell you how you can get the time. Because as you're driving your car, you have free time. So instead of listening to the radio, when you're walking about the streets, put your headphones on. And instead of listening to the latest, I don't know, released by Judas Priest or something, why does we both like our rock music, why don't you listen to something that can actually educate you and do it in small bite-sized chunks? So these are available through audiobooks. When if you're up early in the morning before the wife and kids, why not play that as you're making your breakfast, and get little bite-sized chunks, and it will all add up. So it's very easy to do. I've done it. I've taught myself Spanish doing this as I was walking around the streets. So if I can do it, you can do it as well. And I would also like you viewers to commit to at least one development program for next year, at least one. The more the merrier. But I would say start on the journey. You'll enjoy it. You will never look at life the same again. It doesn't just benefit your business relationships. It benefits everything, your friends, your personal relationships, and you'll have a better understanding of how people actually think and operate.
So just to put the pressure on you then, what would be the first book they should read in your view?
Oh, I was hoping you wouldn't ask me that, but why don't we start off with something that is a classic that I like? It's quite an easy read. It's an old book, traditional, How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. That's a classic, and that's a good starting point. That's not NLP in that, but that gives you some basic things to use. And I've used these techniques in there, and they were absolutely astonishing, the results you will get if you use the principles in that book. And there's a nice summary at the end of the chapters as well. There's no excuse for saying, well, you know, I left it too long before I started the next chapter.
Great.
That's a good book.
Derek, thank you so much for being with us today. That's absolutely fantastic. For our viewers and listeners that stay to the end of this, you'll be able to learn how you can join a private forum, online group, where you can get help, ask questions, find an accountability partner, so that you can take these challenges on. It's all very well putting on all these videos and podcasts. There is so much content out there for financial advisors. None of it will really be of any help unless you take action. So the whole point of a challenge like Derek set today is that you do actually take action, and then you'll see the results from it. So all that remains for me to do is say thank you so much to you, Derek, for your time today. Really appreciate it. And to everyone else, thank you very much for watching. See you next time.
Thank you, Phil.